Randip Janda joins us now. Randip, how are you doing today?
What's up, boys? I could listen to Faber talk about Aiden McDonough for hours. It's like poetry, man. It's like Shakespeare in his prime. Just Faber and prospect talk.
Well, I tell you what, you know Randy. I used to. That's what my favorite part was when I used to produce your show back at 650, and like you guys would be starting to talk about prospects, and I'd always see you guys like look over at me, and I'm like, "Yep, you're right, or no, you're wrong, and then normally
Yeah,
I'd have
the best was like, no,
yeah.
you don't know what you guys are talking about.
Hey, Randy, Quad's completely messed up our show order here, but one of the things we wanted to talk about, he wanted to get to McDonough so bad in this Kudryavtsev stuff because Quad sees he's a fake prospect guy. But what I wanted to talk about off the top was a coach's bump. And I think the Canucks are going through a coach's bump, but it feels like a little bit of a different one. And I'm curious to get your thought because the Canucks are playing with better structure. They're allowing less goals. A lot of good things are being done by this Canucks team. Do you think this is going to be the standard moving forward, or does this have potential to just be a coach's bump, not necessarily towards wins, but maybe a coach's bump towards structure?
Yeah, I think this is a coach's bump towards structure because last year, let's be honest, different voice. Travis came in. Travis had a pretty unique personality, and when he was fired, Bruce Boudreau comes in. It's a lot of good vibes. There's a lot of attitudinal change within the room, and guys feel better about themselves. But in terms of structure, in terms of playing a certain way, we didn't see that. We didn't see that this year either from Bruce Boudreau. Rick Tocchet has brought that structural change that going back to last offseason, Patrick Alvin and Jim Rutherford are talking about. And there's one quote in that end of season press conference where they talked about players knowing where their teammates are going to be. That's essentially a trust conversation. And what we've seen with the Rick Tocchet stretch, especially more recently, is that you're seeing that trust, you're seeing that commitment to structure. Things might go wrong, but these players, and let's be honest, some of these guys were playing in the AHL earlier this year. It's not like they're more skilled than the guys that were in the lineup previously. It's that they just know where to be. So to me, this is a structural change, and the stats bear that, right? Look at the rebound chances against. 1.6 rebounds chances given up every single game since Tocchet took over. There used to be moments within games under Bruce Boudreau that they give up 3 rebound chances on one play, let alone in a game. So that tells you that this team is, changing the way that they play. Rush chances against have gone down significantly as well, guys. So to me, it's about protecting the middle of the ice. It's more than just wins. It's about, okay, this team is denying that middle of the ice. They're sticking to what's being told to them by Rick Tocchet, Adam Foote, Sergei Gonchar, and I think this has staying power. Now, we'll see, this is more than just this year. You have to keep it going into next year. But I think this is more real than last year in the sense that last year was attitudinal, good vibes. This is more of, all right, X's and O's, something that this team needed.
Randip, what have you made of JT Miller's game since Rick Tocchet's come aboard?
Yeah, it feels like Tocchet has really been able to tap into, the competitive fire that JT has. But rather than projecting out, this is a guy that's saying, all right, I'm gonna focus internally here because you can say all you want on the bench, you can react all you want, but if you don't practice what you preach, it's meaningless. And to a certain point, it kind of felt like JT was at that point where there was a high expectation for himself, but also a high expectation for his teammates, but he wasn't really bringing it himself. Now, just being a surefire second line center under Tocchet, he's been able to bring the physicality. He's been pretty good defensively. You start looking at those numbers, and he's starting to practice what he was preaching in the offseason of being a better defensive center. And the other thing I would say is shorthanded, right? You look at the 6 points he's been able to put up since Tocchet has become the coach. That responsibility with Bo Horvat being traded, there was a question of, all right, which one of these guys is going to be able to play shorthanded? Who's going to get that responsibility? And I know Rick Tocchet was saying, hey, I don't want my skill guys on the PK as much. You look at what Pettersson and Miller have been able to do. I like the challenge that JT mentally, it feels like that mentality is, all right, I got to focus on my work. The rest will come. I'll be a leader on this team. But rather than that, Colin Delia shouting matchup, it's focus on yourself first. And the more you do your job, guys are going to be motivated that way too.
Alex, can we get the graphic up here? From Randip, you had a tweet a little bit earlier today that I want to dive into about Quinn Hughes a little bit. Some obviously very impressive numbers. Time on ice, you tweeted this out, Randy, but time on ice, 25-24. That's 5th in the league. Offensive zone possession, 30 minutes and 3 seconds. That's 1st in the league. Offensive zone pass completions, 589. That's 1st in the league. 1st in assists, first in points. A lot of really good things offensively from Quinn Hughes happening right now. How important is he to really, not necessarily just this defense core, because I do think that it's, that's an easy answer. It's massively important here. But from what he's going to be able to bring on the back end, specifically when Filip Hronek comes in here, how do you see Hughes's game kind of adjusting, having somebody being able to back him up on a second pairing or potentially play with him? We don't really know what's going to happen with Hronek yet, but when you see numbers like this, you're damn impressed. It's going to take a workload off of Hronek, no matter the case, if he's playing with Hughes or not. But how important is Hughes to be able to continue this and maybe even improve on this, which is wild to think because he's first in the league in a lot of these stats. But when Hronek gets here, I expect it to be an easier job for Quinn Hughes.
Oh, for sure. And, this is a lot of heavy lifting for Quinn Hughes. We've seen him, bloodied and bandaged a lot this year. But if you start looking at those time on ice totals, the jump has been significant, top 5 in the new year. But even before that, he's been putting up really, really solid numbers. And I look at that offensive production as, he's outpacing Erik Karlsson since the new year, which is telling you something. This is a guy that is going to hit 100 points from defensive scoring in Erik Karlsson, and Quinn Hughes is not far behind. So to me, offensively, with Filip Hronek coming in, and the way that I'd like to see it early on is them on 2 separate pairs. I want to see both of those guys driving, offense and being able to play on separate pairs and really spread that out for the Canucks. So you've got a really good defenseman, a number 1 and a number 2 defenseman on 2 separate pairs where you can balance it out a little bit just to see how that works. But I think that the impact on Quinn Hughes is going to be significant because even though he can play 25 minutes a game, 28 sometimes, he's hit the 30 mark threshold a few times as well, you don't want to play with fire too much. This is a guy that, as good as he is, he's, not even in the prime of his career. That's where he's at in terms of his career. So I would say, for the rest of the season, experiment a little bit. See how they look together for sure, but try them on separate pairs originally. And then there's been a lot of heavy lifting for Quinn Hughes. Yes, you want him to hit those offensive numbers and set career highs. He's going to smash his own Canucks record, but I'd like to see him kind of maybe those minutes drop down by a minute or two, or only use them, excessively when you're chasing a game, or maybe that's when you pair him with Filip Hronek. So I've loved what I've seen. I think the elite level of production from him is one thing, but guys defensively as well. And yet his game is not perfect, but you see, whether it was that, stick check on Michael Bunting in that Toronto game, whether it was against Nashville where he just, does a solid play along the boards and creates an attack going the other way. Just in overtime where he's not going to, crunch dudes against the boards. That's not the type of defensive play he's going to have, but we are seeing some significant benefits and, I think growth in his defensive game too. So to me, put Filip Hronek on a different pair just to see how it goes. And then at the very least, you have that option of putting them together if you need it.
Randip, we had this debate yesterday, and I want to ask you, it's a bit of a weird question, I suppose, but
Okay.
What helps this team more moving forward? A better defense group or a penalty kill that can kill above 70%? What helps this team more? A better defense group or a penalty kill?
Oh, okay. So that one, I've been kind of ripping the defense for a few years, and that's part of it was personnel. But as we see, it was not only personnel. There was obviously some structural changes that needed to be made. But if you are talking about being better in the long term, if you're talking about not eating as much pressure, getting the puck up ice, to me it's defense. I think you have to upgrade, continue to upgrade. Just because you have Ethan Bear, just because you have now Filip Hronek, which is a significant upgrade, you still have to have puck movers, guys that are comfortable on the puck, or at least complementary to players like Quinn Hughes. So as much as the PK is bad, you want to see that number increase. There's no question about that. But when we're talking about ultimate success for this team, some really good teams have mediocre penalty kills, and that's not great. But 5-on-5, can you control the game? Can you make sure you make that stretch pass? Can you skate the puck out of trouble or your own zone? Are you capable of doing that? Do you have defensemen that can do that? To me, that's the more pressing issue with this team, where the PK, it's going to be a work in progress. We've seen some improvements of late, but you need the right personnel, and that will come over time. You don't overspend on that. But defense, we know how right shot defensemen, how they're a rarity. If you can get your hands on one or two of them to upgrade, you do that. So to me, it's moving the puck up ice, defending well, a combination of both of those things, definitely the back end.
I wanted to ask you about next season a little bit too, because I don't think the Canucks are going to have, well, it's kind of obvious, they're not going to have a ton of money to go wild on the free agent market, but they are going to find some money here and there. With this team looking like they want to compete next season for the playoffs, they're going to have to add a piece. I think there's a few different options you can look at here. Is it so?
Yeah,
I guess
look
I'll
at the Dan Milstein client list.
basically. But what I do want to ask is like the options here for the Canucks. I think the top three would be a left shot guy to play with Hronek, a right shot guy to play with Hughes, or a third line center. Which way do you think the Canucks are going to go in free agency this year? If they're spending, let's say, $3 million, right? So you're not getting in the elite of the elite, but I think you're getting a solid NHL player, hopefully, when you're spending $3 million on him. We've seen it go the other way in Vancouver in the past. But which way would you think the Canucks are going to go there? A guy on the right side to play with Hughes, a left shot guy with Hronek, or a center to play on that third line?
Yeah, a couple of elephants in the room in this conversation as well. Oliver Ekman-Larsson is the biggest one, right? We're assuming there's a buyout, but we'll see what happens on that front. Beyond that, if I had to prioritize, I think Ethan Bear is not the long-term answer to Quinn Hughes, but can he give you a year, an additional year next to Quinn Hughes? I think he's capable of that. You want to be a competitive team. You've upgraded the right-hand side, and Filip Hronek is going to give you a little bit more balance on that right-hand side. So I wouldn't put that necessarily as a you have to do this year. You do have something at Ethan Bear. I think that third line center position, figuring that out. Aatu Ratu, you hope is the long-term answer if he can round out his play. But guys, you know as well as I do, that's a long-term project, right? When the last game you play and you play 4 minutes and 22 seconds in the NHL, that tells you how much work has to be done in his game. But the left shot D, yeah, I think that's an important. You getting a penalty killing left shot D is important at this point in time. But the Oliver Ekman-Larsson conversation is going to be something that's going to be pretty prominent. So I'm going right shot center and third line center specifically. If you're looking at, Niels Oman does a good job on the fourth line, but next year in the third line, that's too much of a leap. I don't know if he has that offensive production. I love the way he plays. I've been a fan of his since going, training camp and what he showed there. But him smashing through that first ceiling is one thing. You need offensive production. You need to be a pretty decent player. Even when you're moving up the lineup. And I don't know if he's capable of that for sure. I think maybe a couple years down the road, we can have that conversation. So if I had to prioritize it, guys, it's that 3C position for me where you know what you have in Elias Pettersson. You hope JT Miller can continue to do what he does at the 2C position. He's played great under Rick Tocchet. You hope that continues into next year. And if you listen to the coach, there's no ifs, ands, and buts. He sees JT as that 2C. You need a third piece behind there right now because that to me is not looking solid. Who's that player that is defensively responsible and can chip in offensively occasionally? Now the question is, how cheap is that going to be in the free agent market? That's going to be the question, because if you start looking at free agents available, it's not the greatest of list after a couple of extensions were signed.
I'll text the big man Dan and see who he's got for the Canucks in free agency, and we'll get back to that. Randip, always a pleasure. Thanks for doing this. Have a good call tomorrow as the Senators are in town, which, by the way, for people listening to the show, we're not going to talk about that game at all today. So we'll wrap it up on Monday. But Randip will have the call for you on 650. Randip, appreciate it, man.
Cheers, boys. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.